Give my wife's spot to Savannah. She's the priority now. I heard him clearly through the frosted glass of the parking garage. Savannah, the new marketing consultant. Here barely 7 weeks. Also, my husband's mistress. In that instant, I knew 2 things. They thought I was too weak to fight back, and if I did, I would make it dramatic enough for the entire Mercer Point Properties building to remember forever. My name is Aurora Brooks. On that Monday morning, I drove into the Mercer Point Properties headquarters garage, just as I had every weekday for nearly a decade. The air was cool and smelled of concrete and damp exhaust. I navigated the familiar ramps down to P2, heading for the spot right by the elevator bank. It was not just any spot. It was marked with a crisp blue sign, VP, Operations Reserved, for 3 years. That sign had been my consolation prize. It was the physical placeholder for the regional director title my father-in-law, Martin, had promised me. It was the patch of concrete I earned by being the good soldier, the good wife, the good daughter-in-law. I heard the voices before I saw them, echoing slightly in the cavernous space. My husband, Derek, and the morning shift security guard. Mike, Derek was laughing. That easy, charming laugh he used to close deals and smooth over problems. Just switch it out. Mike, Savannah's having a really tough time. You know, Derek said, his voice dripping with synthetic concern. Being pregnant, that walk from the outer lot is just too much for her. I stopped the car, my hand still on the gear shift. Pregnant. The word hit me like a splash of ice water. Savannah Cole, the marketing consultant, who had been with the firm for exactly 7 weeks, was not pregnant. I knew that for a fact. I also knew she was my husband's mistress. Mike, to his credit, looked uncomfortable. He was holding 2 plaques. One was mine, the one with my name on it, scarred from years of weather. The other was a new, temporary plate, still glossy. I could read it even from 10 yards away. S. Cole, Exec, Director, not VP, not Regional Director, Executive Director. Mike fumbled with the screwdriver. But Mrs. Brooks, she always parks here. This is her assigned spot. I cannot just... It's fine, Derek cut him off, clapping Mike on the shoulder with a force that was more command than comfort. She'll understand. Family first. Right. Savannah is the priority. Just get it done. My head felt strangely light. The click of the screwdriver turning, biting into the metal frame, removing the screws that held my name, sounded impossibly loud. They were not just taking my parking spot. They were taking my job. The Executive Director of Strategic Growth. That was the position Martin had promised me. The one I had been effectively doing without the title or the pay for 3 solid years. 3 years. That's how long I had been waiting. 3 years of 70-hour work weeks. 3 years of pulling impossible permits out of thin air, of launching 3 massive mixed-use housing projects that redefined Port Riverton's skyline, of personally securing 2 major municipal clients who thought Mercer Point was too arrogant to bother with. I remembered standing in Martin's cavernous, walnut-paneled office after landing the City Hall renovation contract. He had poured me a lukewarm coffee in a mug that said, "World's Best Boss," and smiled that paternal smile that never reached his eyes. "Hang in there, daughter-in-law," he had said, patting my arm. "You're doing great work. This will all be yours soon. Just need to smooth things out with the board." He meant smoothing things out for Derek, his son, who had the title but none of the talent. I was the engine. They were just the hood ornament. I was the one who translated Derek's vague vision into actionable logistics, budgets, and timelines. Now, watching Derek hand the new plaque to Mike, I realized soon was never coming. Daughter-in-law was not a term of endearment. It was a job description. It meant workhorse. It meant the one who would hold the family together, quietly, while the men made the important decisions. And apparently, the important decision today was to give my career, my promotion, and my parking spot to my husband's mistress. I put the car back in drive, pulled out of the lane, and drove past them. I did not look at them. I felt Derek's eyes on me, probably bracing for a confrontation, for the tears he expected from his overly emotional wife. He got nothing. I found an unmarked guest spot 2 levels up, next to a leaking drainage pipe. I walked to the elevator bay. I pushed the button. I stared at my reflection in the polished bronze doors. My face was perfectly, professionally blank. When the doors opened, I stepped inside. The small, convex security mirror in the corner captured my image, but it could not capture the sudden, volcanic shift happening inside my chest. The tiny red light of the camera was useless. It could not see the humiliation. It could not see the calculation that followed. His mistress deserves it more than I do. The words looped in my head. The shame was immediate, a hot, acrid burn that threatened to choke me. He said it. He said it out loud, to a security guard, where anyone could hear. He had valued her, the 7-week consultant, over me, his wife of 12 years, his VP of operations. But as the elevator ascended, the heat did not just fade, it condensed, it turned cold, it sharpened into something hard, something heavy. It settled in my stomach like a block of ice. They thought I would take one for the team. They thought I would endure this humiliation for the sake of the Mercer name, for the sake of the family unit, for the illusion of our perfect life in Riverton Heights. They had confused my loyalty for weakness. They had mistaken my professionalism for passivity, a decision, cold and clear, formed in my mind. If they saw me as just a quiet part of the family structure, I would teach them exactly what happens when a load-bearing wall is removed. I would show them the true cost of losing the one person that 70% of their client base knew by name, the one person who knew where every metaphorical body was buried in the city's permitting office. The elevator doors opened onto the executive floor, the smell of expensive, sterile air and faint, burnt coffee. I walked to my office, the one with the glass wall overlooking the Port Riverton waterfront. I sat down in my leather chair, the one I had paid for myself. My computer chimed. A calendar notification popped up on the screen. 4 p.m. Champagne Welcome. S. Cole, Executive Director. It was an invitation to my entire leadership team. A party. They were throwing a party this afternoon to celebrate the woman who had taken my job, hosted by the husband who was sleeping with her, and approved by the father-in-law who had lied to my face for 3 years. It was a slap, a deliberate, calculated, public slap. They wanted me to sit there, smile, and applaud. They expected me to train my own replacement. I looked at the notification for a long, silent minute. Then I closed the calendar invite. I opened my company email client. I navigated to my personal drive, the one nested so deep in the server, only I knew how to access it. I right-clicked. New folder. I typed the name, Transition, Personal. I began dragging the files. Every contract I had negotiated, every blueprint I had revised, every client contact list, every internal workflow I had designed, every single piece of evidence of the work I had done. I started the download. It was everything I had built, and it was everything I would use to tear them down. The Mercer Point property system ran on a simple, unspoken feudal structure. It was technically a high-flying Port Riverton real estate firm, successful because of its deep, bordering on improper connections with the city council, but in reality, it was the Mercer family's personal kingdom. My father-in-law, Martin Mercer, was the chairman, the undisputed king. My husband, Derek, was the crown prince, holding the title of Director of Project Development, which mostly involved taking clients to lunch and presenting my work as his own. And I, Aurora Brooks Mercer, was the one who made the kingdom function. As VP of Operations, I was the one who managed the timelines, secured the permits, wrangled the contractors, and cleaned up Derek's messes. I was the one doing the heavy lifting, the 70-hour weeks, the late-night calls. I had thought, earning my place. At precisely 4 p.m., the email reminder chimed again, summoning us to the main glass-walled conference room for the champagne welcome. It was the corporate equivalent of a public execution. The room was already full when I arrived, the air thick with forced enthusiasm and the scent of cheap sparkling wine. Martin stood at the front, flanked by Derek, who was already laughing too loudly at something Savannah had whispered. Savannah Cole. here for only 7 weeks. First as a consultant, and now, as the new plaque on my parking spot attested, the executive director of strategic growth. She looked expensive, poured into a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my first car, her blonde hair perfect. She looked, I realized with a jolt, exactly like the type of woman Derek always insisted was just a friend. Martin tapped a glass for silence. The room quieted, save for the nervous energy of middle managers who knew exactly what was happening. "Thank you all for coming," Martin began, his voice radiating the paternalistic charisma that had charmed city planners for 30 years. "It's an exciting day for Mercer Point. We're always looking to the future, always evolving, and to that end, I am thrilled to officially welcome Savannah Cole as our new Executive Director of Strategic Growth." He beamed at her. Derek beamed at her. It was nauseating. "Savannah brings something vital to our team," Martin continued, and his eyes, almost involuntarily, flicked to me. They met mine for less than a second. In that fleeting glance, I saw it all, a flicker of genuine guilt, instantly smothered by the cold, heavy weight of expectation. He was not apologizing. He was commanding me to endure. "She brings a young energy," he said, turning back to his new star. "A new perspective. Exactly what we need to shake things up and tackle the next generation of Port Riverton's development. A young energy, a new perspective. It was the oldest, most tired corporate euphemism for, 'You're being replaced.' He was telling the entire company that my 3 years of loyal, back-breaking work were now considered old, stale, and in the way. He invited Savannah to speak. She stepped forward, all confidence and bright, empty smiles. "Thank you so much, Martin and Derek. Thank you for your incredible support." She let her hand rest on Derek's arm for just a fraction too long. "I am just so thrilled to be here, to learn from all of you." Then, she turned her gaze on me, across the room. Her smile widened, predatory and sweet. "I especially have to thank Aurora," she said, her voice carrying across the silent room. "Aurora has been so generous in sharing her files and materials with me. I mean, really, I'm just building on the incredible foundation she's already laid." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. She said it so casually, as if my career's work was a stack of old notes I had passed to her in study hall. She was not just taking my job, she was taking my credit, right in front of everyone. She was painting me as the helpful assistant who had prepared the way for the real executive. I held my expression steady, a neutral, polite mask I had perfected over years of Mercer family dinners. I glanced at my colleagues. Most were staring intently into their champagne flutes, suddenly fascinated by the bubbles. They saw it. They knew. But they also knew their paychecks were signed by Martin, not by me. As the polite applause started, Zoe, the head of administration and a woman who had been with the company since before I arrived, walked past me. She did not say a word. She just brushed her hand against my forearm, a brief, warm touch that said, "I see it, and I'm sorry." It was the only genuine human contact I had in that room. The gathering broke into smaller, nervous clusters. I turned to leave, but Derek was suddenly in front of me, blocking my path. He leaned in, his smile gone, replaced by the familiar look of annoyance he wore whenever I was not perfectly aligned with his needs. "Don't," he hissed, his voice low, his eyes darting around to see who was watching. "Do not make a scene, Aurora. Dad cannot stand drama in the office. You know that." "He just gave my job to your mistress," I said, my voice barely a whisper, cold and precise. "Do not start," he shot back, his face darkening. "This is business. Savannah is bringing in new contacts. She is working hard. And frankly," he added, his voice dripping with condescension, "she really does need that parking spot. That walk is a lot for her right now." He was defending her, not just her position, but her convenience. He was doubling down on the lie, on the humiliation, on the fact that her manufactured needs now officially outweighed my 12 years of marriage and 3 years of professional devotion. It was in that moment, under the buzzing fluorescent lights, with the taste of stale champagne in the air, that the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. In their minds, I was not Aurora Brooks, the VP of Operations, who had saved the company millions. I was not the professional who had secured the city contracts. I was daughter-in-law. I was an extension of Derek. My skills were not my own. They were a family resource. And now that a shinier, newer resource had presented herself, the family was simply reallocating my duties. I was not an executive. I was just the daughter-in-law who knows things. "Martin wants to see you," Derek said, straightening his tie, the discussion over as far as he was concerned. "My office? Now?" Martin's office was on the top floor, all walnut paneling, brushed steel, and a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the river. It was a room designed to make people feel small. Martin was seated behind his massive desk, steepling his fingers. He did not ask me to sit. "Aurora," he began, his tone now that of a disappointed, loving father. "That was difficult today. I know that." I said nothing. "But you have to see the bigger picture. Derek needs support. The company needs new blood. Savannah is a go-getter." "I have been a go-getter for 3 years. Martin," I said, my voice flat. "And we appreciate it," he said quickly, brushing my contribution aside. "Deeply, which is why I have a new, exciting role for you. We want you to transition to a senior advisory position." "An advisory position?" "Exactly. Extremely well paid. Of course, your only job would be to support Savannah, help her get to know the clients, show her the ropes with the city council. Make the transition smooth. No more late nights. No more 70-hour weeks. You'd be invaluable." He was asking me to train her. He was asking me to personally hand over the relationships I had spent years building to the woman who was sleeping with my husband. He was offering to pay me a salary to orchestrate my own obsolescence. "Martin," I said, my hands clenching at my sides. "She is sleeping with your son," he sighed, a long, weary sound, as if I had brought up a trivial, distasteful subject. "Aurora, that is a private matter between you and Derek. It has no place in this office. What matters is the company. What matters is the family." He stood up and walked around the desk, placing a heavy hand on my shoulder. It was meant to be comforting. It felt like a shackle. "You are family, Aurora," he said, his voice soft, his eyes hard. "We take care of our own. Do this for us. Do this for the family." That was it. That was the lock clicking into place. He was using the very concept of family, the one I had sacrificed so much for, as the final weapon to demand my compliance. I looked at him, at this man I had respected, had looked up to as a father, and I knew, in that instant, that I would not be warning Derek. I would not be giving them a chance to prepare. Family, as he defined it, was a one-way street. "I understand," I said, my voice perfectly calm. "Thank you for clarifying my new role." I returned to my office and closed the door. The heavy glass muffled the sounds of the celebratory champagne party down the hall, but I could still feel the vibrations. I sat in my chair, not moving, and stared at the wall opposite my desk. It was my brag wall, as Derek had once teasingly called it. On it hung 3 framed Employee Excellence Awards from Mercer Point, one for each of the last 3 years. Next to them was a larger, more ornate frame, a commendation from the city of Port Riverton, thanking me by name for my unwavering dedication in getting the Riverfront Lofts project approved and built under budget. My eyes traced the engraved script of my name. I remembered the night that commendation was given. I had been up until 1 a.m. with the city permitting office, negotiating a wastewater drainage variance, a detail so mundane and critical that Derek would not even know how to spell it. I remembered the phone calls, the endless, grinding work. I also remembered the other calls, the ones from Derek, in the middle of those same 70-hour weeks. "Going to be late, honey," he would say, his voice too breezy. "Have to do another site visit for the new acquisition." And then, more recently, Savannah's coming with me. She has a great eye for marketing potential. Site visits. I had believed him, or at least, I had chosen to. I had been too busy running his father's company to question why my husband suddenly needed to scout locations with a marketing consultant at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my desk. The pieces clicked together with the cold, hard finality of a deadbolt. Savannah was not just an affair. This was not just a midlife crisis cliché. It was a coup. I picked up a pen and started a fresh page on my legal pad, the way I always did when analyzing a failing project. Fact 1. Savannah is sleeping with Derek. Fact 2. Derek is actively protecting her position and perks, as evidenced by my parking spot. Fact 3. Martin, desperate for new blood and terrified of looking stale, has given Savannah the exact title he promised to me. Conclusion, they were not just tolerating Derek's affair. They were leveraging it. They were actively replacing me, the workhorse daughter-in-law, with the shiny new mistress. They were institutionalizing her. My training, the operational mindset that Martin had exploited for so long, took over. The hot, suffocating fog of betrayal began to clear, replaced by the Arctic chill of strategic analysis. I began to list assets and liabilities, just as I would for any property acquisition. Their liability. Me, their asset. They thought I was their asset. I started a new list. What happens to Mercer Point properties? Functionally. The day after I'm gone, 1. The entire network of subcontractors I had personally vetted and cultivated for a decade. The ones who took my calls at midnight, who found a crew for a last-minute pour, who gave us preferred pricing because they trusted me, not the Mercer name. They would not take Savannah's call. 2. The 4 major municipal and public sector clients, the Port Riverton Housing Board, the City Council Development Committee. They did not deal with Derek's charm or Martin's bluster. They dealt with my spreadsheets, my timelines, and my word. I was their point of contact. My departure would not be a transition, it would be a void. 3. The institutional knowledge. I was the only person in the building who knew the precise, unwritten Byzantine sequence of approvals needed to get a single shovel in the ground in this city. I was their capacity to save a deadline. I looked at the list. They were gutting the entire operational core of the company, and they were doing it to install a 20-something consultant. I leaned back in my chair. A question, sharp and genuine, formed in my mind. Do they really think I have nowhere else to go? It was astounding. They had become so used to me being family that they had forgotten I was a professional. I am 39 years old. I have a pristine resume, a spotless track record, and a wall of real, tangible achievements. I was not trapped here by loyalty. I was anchored here by it. And they had just cut the rope. I put my company-issued laptop aside. I pulled my personal laptop from my bag. I opened a fresh, encrypted browser. I typed in the names of our top 3 competitors, the ones who had been trying to poach my project managers for years. Harbor North Development, Atlas Civic Renewal, Brightline Communities. Harbor North had a posting for a regional urban projects director. The description looked like it had been written from my own resume. Atlas Civic Renewal needed a new VP of Operations. Brightline wanted a Chief of Civic Engagement. For the next hour, I updated my resume, translating my work at Mercer Point from the vague family contributions they saw into the hard, cold language of metrics and achievements. Managed a $300 million portfolio. Secured $40 million in public sector contracts. Reduced permitting approval times by 30%, citywide. Then I opened a new document. I typed my resignation. It was short, 4 sentences. It was addressed to Martin. It was polite, professional, and completely devoid of emotion. I stated that I was resigning my position as Vice President of Operations, effective in 2 weeks. Per the terms of my contract, I thanked him for the opportunity. I wished the company well in its future endeavors. I saved it to my desktop. I would print it tomorrow, on my own paper. A letter this cold, this formal, from his daughter-in-law, would hit Martin like a public slap. It was a declaration that our relationship was no longer personal. It was contractual, and it was over. A phrase formed in my mind, a new maxim: loyalty without respect is just labor on discount. I had been working for a discount for 12 years. The sale was over. I minimized the browser and the letter. I opened one last file on my company drive, the one I had used to coordinate the last Mercer Point shareholder event. It was the architectural schematic of the headquarters building. I zoomed in on the P1 garage level, the executive VIP section. I saw my old spot, the one now reserved for S. Cole. I saw Derek's spot next to it. And then I saw the one at the very end, right against the glass-walled entrance to the main atrium, the one visible from the lobby, the one reserved for the city mayor or visiting senators, the one that, on a normal day, was reserved exclusively for Martin, Chairman M. Mercer. I stared at that small rectangle on the screen. It was the most visible, most arrogant, most untouchable piece of concrete in the entire building. I took a screenshot. I opened a private email, sent it to my personal address, and saved the file. This would be the centerpiece. My parking spot had been a symbol of what they were taking from me. His spot would be a symbol of what I was taking back. This was where I would park. This would be the place they would never, ever forget. The drive back to Riverton Heights felt different. The familiar turns through the manicured suburban streets seemed foreign. The oversized houses sitting in the dusk, looking like hollow. Theatrical sets. Our house was no different. I pulled into the 3-car garage and walked into the kitchen. The air was thick with the smell of a performance Southern-style fried chicken. Derek was at the stove, humming along to a playlist, a checked apron tied neatly around his waist. He was playing the part of the devoted, happy husband. It was a scene of domestic warmth, a carefully constructed lie. He turned, a bright, false smile on his face. "Hey, you're home late. Big day." I dropped my keys on the granite island. The clatter was sharp in the warm, greasy air. I did not take off my coat. "Martin called me into his office after the champagne welcome," I said. My voice was flat, cutting straight through his performance. Derek's smile faltered for a second. He turned back to the chicken, skillfully flipping a piece in the cast-iron skillet. "Oh yeah, what did the old man want?" "Probably to congratulate you on whatever. He offered me a new position, senior advisor." "See? That's great. Right, senior. That's a big deal," he said, not looking at me. "My job is to train Savannah." He gave her my title, the one he promised me 3 years ago. Derek spun around, his face a mask of manufactured outrage. The spatula dripped onto the floor. "He what? After everything you've done, he promised you that role. I'm going to talk to him. This is unacceptable." It was a good performance. He almost looked genuinely angry. For a moment, the old familiar pattern nearly tricked me into feeling a rush of gratitude, of us against them. But I just watched him. I waited. It did not take long. He picked up the spatula, his anger deflating with a sigh. "Look, Aurora, let's think about this rationally." "Rationally?" "Yes, Dad is under a lot of pressure. The investors want to see new faces, new energy. Savannah, she brings a lot of new ideas." He was pacing now, switching from indignant husband to corporate negotiator in less than 5 seconds. "You should think about the company. Aurora, this isn't a bad thing, an advisory role. Less stress, same pay, probably better. You're always so stressed. This is a good thing for us." "He gave the new executive director my parking spot," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Derek stopped pacing. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of pure, unadulterated annoyance. The mask was completely gone. "Oh, come on. Is that what this is about? A piece of pavement?" He let out an exasperated laugh. "Aurora, be reasonable. Savannah has to travel a lot. She's in and out all day meeting new clients. She deserves that closer spot more than you." He said it, just like that, not with malice, but with the simple, unthinking entitlement of a man stating an obvious fact. His mistress, who had to travel a lot, deserved it more. The air left my lungs. The hot, acidic shame from the garage returned, but this time it was different. It was the last flicker of an old emotion. When I spoke, my voice was arctic. Deserves it. More than your wife. He flinched, finally recognizing the tone. He saw he had miscalculated. He immediately tried to dodge, to deflect, to make me the problem. Don't do that, he snapped. Don't turn this into some personal, jealous thing. This is business. You're making this about you. But I'm trying to help your career here. Don't create divisions in front of Dad. You're helping my career by giving my job to the woman you're sleeping with. His face went dark. We had moved from manipulation to open warfare. I told you. That is not what is happening. You are being hysterical. You are going to ruin everything I've built for us. What you've built. Yes, I'm the one who has to manage Dad, who has to keep this family together. And you, he said, jabbing the spatula in my direction. You are going to make a scene. I know you. You're going to go into the office tomorrow and make this a problem. And what if I do? He threw the spatula into the sink. It clattered, loud and violent. Then you will make Dad think you don't belong in this family. Is that what you want? If you make a scene at the company, you will prove to him that you are not a Mercer. You're just an employee. You have to think about the family. Aurora. There it was, the real threat, the real weapon, not the affair, not the job. It was the name I had taken at our wedding, the one I had worn with pride, the one I had worked tirelessly to honor. He was telling me that the name was not a shield. It was a leash, and he was holding it. My membership in this family was conditional, contingent on my silence, on my willingness to accept his mistress's promotion. My heart rate, which had been pounding with anger, suddenly slowed. Everything became very clear. I was not just fighting an affair. I was fighting a systemic, dynastic conspiracy to push me out, and my husband was leading the charge. I looked at him, this stranger in my kitchen, his face flushed with anger and the heat from the stove. The smell of the chicken was suddenly repulsive, oily and cloying. You're right, I said. My voice was soft. He visibly relaxed, thinking he had won. Good, he said, turning back to the stove, his tone magnanimous in victory. I knew you'd see it my way. Now, let's eat. This chicken is perfect. I'm not hungry, I said. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving him standing there. I did not go to our bedroom. I went to the guest room at the end of the hall and locked the door. For an hour. I sat on the edge of the perfectly made bed. The silence of the room, a stark contrast to the pounding in my head. Then, I pulled my personal laptop from my bag. I opened it, the small blue light of the power button seeming to glow with a life of its own. I opened my browser. I went to the Harbor North Development Careers page. I pulled up the application for Regional Urban Projects Director. I attached my new, metrics-driven resume, and then, as a final touch, I attached the case study I had written for myself, the one detailing my precise method for optimizing residential project timelines, the very method that had saved the Riverfront Lofts project. I hit send. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark. My mind went back to the garage, to the image of my name being unscrewed from the wall. If you say your mistress deserves my spot, I thought, my hands clenching into fists, then I'll just have to pick another spot. One you will never forget for the rest of your life. I left the house before Derek woke up. The fried chicken was still in the skillet, congealed and cold. I printed my resignation letter at a 24-hour copy shop 5 towns over. I used my own paper, a heavy cream-colored bond stock that I used for my personal stationery. It felt substantial in my hand. I arrived at the office at precisely 9:05 a.m. I knew Martin's schedule better than he did. He finished his first coffee at 9, and his assistant had a standing order not to put any calls through until 9:30. It was his window for strategic thought, which usually meant him staring out his window at the river. His assistant, Catherine, looked up as I approached, her face a mix of surprise and pity. Good morning, Aurora. He's in. Thank you, Catherine, I said. I did not break stride. I pushed open the heavy, soundproofed walnut door. Martin was, as predicted, standing by the floor-to-ceiling glass, his back to the room. "Aurora," he said, turning, his face arranging itself into a mask of paternal concern. He had clearly rehearsed this. "I'm glad you're here. I hope you and Derek had a productive talk last night. I'm sure he explained the nuance of this." "I am resigning," I said. My voice cut through the air-conditioned silence. I walked forward and placed the heavy cream envelope in the exact center of his massive, empty desk. He stared at it. "What is this, a joke?" "My 2 weeks' notice," I said. He blinked, then let out a short, barking laugh of genuine disbelief. He picked up the envelope, felt the heavy stock, and his smile vanished. He ripped it open, his movements suddenly jerky. He read the 4 short sentences. His face went from confused to a deep, blotchy red. It was the same shock I had seen in Derek, the same profound inability to compute that a decision had been made without his permission. "You can't," he said. It was not a question. It was an order, a reflex. "It's done. Martin, you cannot leave right now." He sputtered, his voice rising, the famous Martin Mercer charm evaporating like cheap cologne. "Savannah needs you. The company needs you to guide this transition. We have the Riverfront Lofts variance hearing." I allowed myself a small, cold pause. I looked at this man, the king of Port Riverton, his power suddenly looking like a cheap, ill-fitting suit. "I'm afraid she doesn't," I said, my voice as calm and neutral as the glass walls around us. "I left detailed process notes in all the project files. Everything is documented. I'm sure someone as talented as your new executive director of strategic growth will have no trouble figuring it out." His jaw tightened. He knew, as I did, that the process notes were useless without the institutional knowledge I held in my head. The processes were not the asset. "This is because of the parking spot, isn't it?" he said, grasping, his mind searching for the most trivial, female reason he could find. "Aurora, that's just logistics. We can fix that. We'll get you a better spot. Thank you for the opportunities. Martin," I said, turning. "I'll be working out my final 2 weeks from my office, per my contract." I walked out, leaving him standing in the middle of his empire, the letter still clutched in his hand. The news spread through the office with the speed of a digital brush fire, before I had even sat down at my desk. My personal phone buzzed. It was a text from Zoe, the head of administration, who had been with the company for 20 years. I heard, "Are you okay lunch today?" outside the building. I replied, "Yes, and yes." My desk phone rang. I looked at the caller ID, Jim Anderson, project manager for the city center build. I let it ring for a moment, then picked up. "Aurora, thank God," he said, his voice high with panic. "I just got a call from the city. They're rejecting the Phase 2 plumbing variance. They said the new submission is missing the environmental impact study. Savannah sent it over yesterday, and Aurora, they're threatening to halt the project. She doesn't know what she's doing." "That sounds very stressful." "Jim," I said, my voice professional and distant. "What do I do?" "Can you call them? Can you fix it?" he pleaded. "I'm afraid my duties are being transitioned. Jim, you'll need to coordinate with the new executive director. I'm sure she has it under control." I hung up before he could respond, and then I muted my desk phone's ringer. As I did, a new email notification popped up on my personal laptop, which I had tethered to my phone's hotspot. I had not logged onto the Mercer Point network all morning. "Subject your application. Harbor North Development." My heart gave a single, hard thump. I opened it. It was not an automated reply. It was from Lydia Grant. "Chief Operating Officer, Ms. Brooks, thank you for your interest. Your resume and case study are extremely impressive. We are very familiar with your work. In fact, several members of the Port Riverton Housing Board have mentioned you by name in our recent meetings. They, and we, have been frustrated. by the recent management changes and family priorities at Mercer Point. Would you be available for a confidential call tomorrow at 10 a.m.? I stared at the screen, the housing board. The very clients Martin had used my daughter-in-law status to woo. They were not just clients. They were my references. Martin's nepotism was not just my liability. It was now his. I typed back a simple, "Yes, 10 a.m. is perfect." The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in quiet, malicious compliance. I was polite, I was present, I was utterly useless to them. I spent the days methodically purging my office. I answered no strategic questions. I forwarded all panicked emails from project managers directly to Savannah, copying Martin on each one. Per my transition plan, I would write, "Please direct all operational queries to Savannah Cole." I spent hours on my personal laptop, downloading the last of my personal files from the transition personal folder I had created, then securely wiped the folder from the server. I shredded every personal note, every old to-do list. I packed my framed awards, my city commendation, and my personal books. I left the company-issued furniture and the bland, corporate art. By the end of the first week, my office looked like a sterile, unrented space. In the evenings, I did my real work. On Tuesday, I had my call with Lydia Grant at Harbor North. It was less an interview, more a strategic alignment. On Thursday, I quietly reached out to Maya Collins in finance. Maya was brilliant, a wizard with forecasting, and had been passed over for promotion twice because Derek found her too negative. "Maya," I said, over coffee far from the office, "I'm making a move. I can't say where yet. But if I told you there was a position where your forecasts would be seen as strategic assets instead of inconvenient facts, would you be interested in a conversation in, say, a month?" Maya's eyes widened over her cup. She just nodded. "1 month? Call me." On Friday, I called Rosa Delgado, the permitting specialist who had been my right hand for 5 years, the one who truly knew the city code. She was underpaid, overworked, and constantly reorganized under junior managers. "Rosa," I said, "what if you could do the same work for 30% more pay and a boss who actually listens to you?" "Aurora," she said, her voice thick. "You just say the word." My final day was a Friday. I left at 5 p.m., on the dot. I turned in my keys and my ID badge to Zoe, who gave me a hug that lasted just a little too long. That night, I did not go home. Derek had been texting, oscillating between, "Where are you?" and "You're being incredibly childish." I ignored them. Instead, I drove my own car, a dark gray SUV, to the Mercer Point headquarters. I parked across the street. I knew the internal events calendar by heart. I had managed it for years, the Urban Vision Gala. The company's biggest press-facing event of the year was in 2 weeks. It was their attempt to calm investors and city officials about the new direction. It was the perfect time to make a reappearance. I drove around the block and entered the garage, taking a ticket like a visitor. I drove down to P1. The garage was mostly empty. There it was, the chairman's spot. I got out of my car and walked to it. It was, as I remembered, perfectly positioned, right by the glass doors to the atrium. Anyone standing in the lobby, anyone waiting for an elevator, anyone mingling at a reception, could see this spot. I pulled a small measuring tape from my bag and measured the width, 12 feet, more than enough room. I took 3 pictures from different angles, capturing its proximity to the lobby doors. On my way out, I stopped at my old spot, the temporary plaque. S. Cole, exec, director, was already streaked with grime, a fitting welcome. As I drove away, I checked my personal email. The internal Mercer Point events calendar I had forwarded to myself confirmed it. The Urban Vision Gala, 2 weeks from tonight, the key to their relaunch. It was the perfect time to make a reappearance. My last stop of the night was my home office, but only to pick up my mail. The next morning, Saturday, I had an appointment. I had booked it on Monday, right after the champagne party, a 9 a.m. consultation with the most ruthless and most effective divorce attorney in Port Riverton. My personal transition was moving right on schedule. My first day at Harbor North Development felt like stepping out of a pressurized cabin into fresh air. The headquarters was not a dark, walnut-paneled fortress designed to intimidate. It was an open-plan loft in a renovated warehouse, all exposed brick, steel beams, and natural light. There were no closed doors, no hushed, fearful assistants guarding the executives. People were collaborating in clusters, their voices energetic and focused. There was no family, there was just a company, working. My new office was a corner space with glass walls, but they felt inclusive, not isolating. Within 10 minutes, Lydia Grant, the chief operating officer, walked in with 2 coffees. She was a tall woman in her 50s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense energy. She handed me a cup. "Welcome, Aurora," she said, taking a seat. "I want to get one thing out of the way, so we're clear." "All right," I said, bracing myself. "We didn't hire you because you're a Mercer. We hired you because the Port Riverton Housing Board thinks you're the only person in this city who can manage a multi-phase public housing project without it turning into a political nightmare. We hired you in spite of you being a Mercer." She took a sip of her coffee. "We are not a family, Ms. Brooks. We are a team. We expect results. We reward them. And we don't care who you're married to." A weight I had not even realized I was carrying lifted off my shoulders. "I appreciate that, Lydia. More than you know." "Good," she said, her tone softening. "Now, your first assignment. You mentioned in your interview that you had a unique insight into Mercer Point's operational vulnerabilities. We're competing against them for the new West End redevelopment. I want that insight." I leaned forward. This was my element. "It's not complicated. Mercer Point's entire operational structure has a single point of failure. It was designed that way." "You," she said. "Me," I confirmed. "They built a multi-million-dollar company that relied on one person's institutional knowledge for all critical path items permitting, contractor relations, and municipal negotiations. But they never respected that person, so they never documented or cross-trained." "Because you were family," Lydia guessed, a cynical smile playing on her lips. "You weren't a flight risk." "I was just the daughter-in-law who knows things," I said. "Their vulnerability is that they've just replaced that single point of failure with someone who has zero experience in any of those 3 critical areas. They didn't replace a person. They created a vacuum, and that vacuum is about to start sucking in timelines and money." Lydia's smile widened. "That's the best strategic analysis I've heard all year." She stood up. "Your title is Regional Urban Projects Director. Your starting salary is 20% higher than your old one, and the stock option package will be on your desk by noon. Welcome to Harbor North." She left, and I was alone in my new office, the good coffee warming my hands. Regional Urban Projects Director. The exact title Martin had dangled in front of me for 3 years. A reward for being a good girl was handed to me by a competitor on day 1, as a starting point. Lydia wasted no time. My first task was a rescue mission. Harbor North had a low-income housing project that was stalled, buried in the same permitting hell I knew so well. It had been stuck in the city's zoning and planning committee for 6 weeks. I spent the morning reading the file. By noon, I had identified the problem. The person who filed it had used the wrong classification code, triggering an automatic environmental review that was not necessary. It was a rookie mistake, but a fatal one. I picked up my phone. I did not call the general number for the planning office. I called the direct line of a deputy commissioner I had spent years building a professional, respectful relationship with. "Frank," I said. "Aurora Brooks. I'm over at Harbor North now." "Yes, a new challenge. Listen, I'm looking at the application for your project on Elm Street, and I think your team might have been sent the wrong file wrapper." 2 days later, the project was fully permitted and green-lit. It was a problem I had solved in less than 24 hours, one that had stymied their previous team for almost 2 months. It was a skill set Savannah Cole, with her marketing degree and fresh manicure, could not even begin to understand. The news from the outside world started to trickle in. Not from Derek or Martin, who had maintained a complete, stony silence since my departure, but from the professional grapevine. My phone started buzzing with texts and emails from former clients, their tones shifting from polite confusion to active panic. "Hey, Aurora. I've left 3 messages for Savannah about the Phase 4 inspection. She hasn't called me back. Is there a new process? Aurora, I hope you're well. Derek told me I have to run all material changes through Savannah Cole, but she doesn't seem to understand the city's approval process for non-standard materials. Can you advise? Aurora, we have a major issue. We just got a stop work order on the city center site. Your replacement filed the wrong variance paperwork." This last one came from Jim Anderson, the project manager who had called me in a panic on my last day. I forwarded it to Lydia. She was in my office a minute later, holding her tablet. Mercer Point's city center project, one of their flagships, a stop work order. She looked at me, an impressed, almost predatory glint in her eye. "This is your doing." "It's their doing," I corrected her. "I just got out of the way. That project is now officially 6 weeks behind schedule and will be costing them $50,000 a day in penalties." Lydia paced my office for a moment. "These clients," she said, motioning to my phone, "they're all coming to you. They're all tied to Mercer Point contracts." "For now," I said, "but they are my relationships. If any of them were to, say, find a way out of their Mercer Point contracts and approach us, could you handle that influx of work?" I met her gaze. "Lydia, I will not solicit a single client. I will not be accused of poaching or violating my old contract. But if a client initiates contact with Harbor North after legally terminating their relationship with Mercer Point, then yes, I can handle all of them." She nodded, satisfied. "Good. That's the answer I wanted. We don't poach. We just position ourselves to catch what they drop." I leaned back, a new, cold confidence settling in. I had one more piece of business. "Speaking of catching what they drop," I said, "I have a recommendation. 2, actually. Mercer Point has a financial analyst named Maya Collins and a permitting specialist named Rosa Delgado. They are the 2 most competent, underpaid, and unappreciated assets in that building. Martin and Derek overlook them constantly," I continued. "I don't know if we have full-time roles, but if Harbor North were to retain them as part-time consultants, we would not only gain their expertise, but we would be giving 2 qualified women an escape hatch from a system that holds them down. It would also, incidentally, complete the gutting of Mercer Point's remaining institutional knowledge." Lydia looked at me for a long moment, then smiled. "Aurora, I think you're going to fit in here beautifully. Get me their contact info." That evening, I drove home to the small, upscale apartment I had rented, the one Derek did not know existed. I sat on the balcony, overlooking a different part of the river, a part I had earned, for the first time in 3 years. I wasn't an exhausted, underappreciated daughter-in-law. I was a 39-year-old woman at the peak of her career. I was the regional urban projects director. I was valued, and I was still completely, terrifyingly silent to the Mercer family. Derek's texts had stopped. Martin's calls had stopped. They had retreated into their fortress, no doubt spinning a story about my emotional departure. They thought I had just quit. They thought I had run away. They had no idea I was regrouping. They had no idea I was rearming. They were preparing for their big Urban Vision Gala to reassure their investors. They thought I was gone, but I was just waiting for the party. It took less than 1 month. The news broke in the Port Riverton Business Journal, not in a splashy headline, but in a small column on the municipal beat. The billion-dollar riverbank renovation contract, Mercer Point's flagship project for the next 5 years, had been officially reevaluated. The city council cited significant delays and a failure to meet preliminary timeline assurances. The contract was being put back out to bid. They had lost it, the biggest municipal project in a decade, the one I had spent 2 years securing. They had lost it in 4 weeks. The official reason: failure to meet timeline assurances, was corporate speak for the new team is completely incompetent. The first call from Martin came that afternoon. I was in a budget meeting with Lydia, and I let it go to voicemail. I listened to it later, standing in the bright, open-plan kitchen at Harbor North. Aurora, his voice was strained, the paternal warmth replaced by a thin, desperate edge. It's Martin. Listen, I just got off a very difficult call with the council. They don't seem to understand the new workflow. I was hoping you could just call Frank for me. Just as a favor. Straighten this out. He'll listen to you. We're family. After all. Family. The word he used as a command. I deleted the message. He called again 2 days later, after the second and third small clients had sent their termination notices. Aurora, I am asking you, as your father-in-law, to stop this. Whatever game you're playing, it's hurting the company. Just talk to these people. Tell them Savannah is still getting up to speed. I picked up the phone. Martin, I said, my voice calm and professional. I'm afraid I can't do that. I have a conflict of interest. A conflict? What are you talking about? I work for Harbor North Development now, I said, as if informing him of the weather. My fiduciary duty is to my current employer. I can't consult for a direct competitor. I'm sure you understand. I heard a sharp intake of breath. He hadn't known. In his arrogance, he assumed I was just sitting at home, waiting for him to call. You went to them, he hissed, the name Harbor North like acid on his tongue. After all we've done for you. I wish you all the best, Martin, I said, and hung up. The texts from Derek started an hour later. They were a pathetic blend of pleading and threats, with no punctuation and a lot of typos. Aurora, you have to stop this. You're making Dad crazy. You're embarrassing me. You're embarrassing the family. We're Mercers. This isn't what we do. I stared at the text. No apology. No, I'm sorry I cheated. No, I'm sorry I gave your job away. Just, you're embarrassing me. I didn't reply. I just forwarded the text chain to my divorce attorney with a simple note, adding this to the file, the real comedy. However, came from Rosa Delgado. Harbor North had, as I'd suggested, put both Rosa and Maya on retainer as part-time consultants. Rosa was sitting in our first strategy session, a glow of confidence on her I had never seen before. So, I got a call, Rosa said, trying to suppress a grin. From the new executive director of strategic growth, on my personal cell. Lydia leaned forward. Oh, do tell. She wanted to know, Rosa continued, and I quote, where we keep the list of the city council's birthdays. I told her we didn't have one. Then she asked me to explain what a zoning variance was. She thought it was a fine. The room, full of seasoned developers and project managers, went silent for a beat. Then it erupted in laughter. It wasn't just a laugh. It was a release. They understood, in that moment, the full scope of the absurdity. She asked what a variance was, Lydia said, wiping a tear from her eye. And she's running their flagship projects. She's not running them, I said quietly. She's running them into the ground. It was after that meeting that Lydia's assistant flagged me down. Aurora. 3 new meeting requests just came in. The principals from City Light Properties, Apex Holdings, and Greenview. They all said they were leaving Mercer Point and would only be moving their business if you were the one handling their accounts. I checked with Lydia. They all terminated first. Sent the termination letters to Martin this morning, she confirmed. They're free agents, and they're all yours. The final piece of news came from Maya. She called me that evening, her voice low. It's bad, Aurora, she said. Worse than you think. The Riverbank contract loss triggered a review from our main investors. Martin is in full-blown panic mode. The city planning department just sent back the city center file. Said the attitude of the strategic director was, quote, unprofessional and dismissive. Savannah apparently told the deputy commissioner he didn't understand marketing. I had to sit down. She said that to Frank. That's the rumor, Maya said. Now, Martin is doubling down. He's pushing the Urban Vision Gala. He moved it up. It's next week. He's trying to get all the investors and city council members in one room to reassure them. Reassure them with what? I asked. With a keynote presentation on the new vision of Mercer Point. Guess who's delivering it? Savannah, I breathed. Bingo. Derek is coordinating the whole event. They're positioning it as the new generation taking over. They're desperate to prove everything is fine. I thanked Maya and hung up. I stood and walked to my new window, looking out over the city. They were throwing a party, a huge, public, press-filled party to paper over the cracks I had exposed. And they were putting the two people who caused the cracks in charge of it. It was the most arrogant, most idiotic, most Mercer thing they could possibly do. And that's when the idea, which had been a vague notion of revenge, crystallized into a perfect, precise, and practical plan. They had said their new priority, the Mistress, deserved the wife's parking spot, so I would use their parking spot, the one that symbolized all their power and privilege, to expose the entire, sordid relationship. I picked up my phone. My first call was to a high-end car rental service. I booked a black Lincoln Navigator, the exact model the mayor used, opulent, official, and utterly unimpeachable. My second call was to a friend, a graphic designer, to help me with some presentation materials. My third call was to Frank, the deputy commissioner Savannah had insulted. I didn't mention Mercer Point. I just asked him, as a friend, how the VIP parking logistics for the upcoming Urban Vision Gala were being handled, as I had a new Harbor North board member I might be bringing. He was more than happy to help. By the end of the call, I had a fully authorized, name on the list, VIP parking pass for the gala's innermost security ring. It was completely, beautifully legitimate. My final email of the night was from my lawyer. It was the draft proposal. It was meticulous, detailing 12 years of my financial and professional contributions to the marriage, juxtaposed against Derek's infidelity. It contained a clause, highlighted in yellow, outlining the state statutes on alimony in cases of blatant marital misconduct and financial perfidy. I saved the document to a secure file. I would have a copy printed, just in case. The gala was going to be an unforgettable night, one way or another. The Mercer Point Urban Vision Gala was, as always, an exercise in suffocating self-importance. The entrance to the headquarters was flooded with lights, valets in red vests, and the quiet hum of expensive German sedans. I arrived at 7:03 p.m., right in the peak of the VIP arrival window. I pulled the rented Lincoln Navigator up to the security checkpoint for the P1 garage. The guard, a senior guy named Frank, whom I'd always treated with respect, leaned down to the window. "Good evening, ma'am," he started, then squinted. "Mrs. Brooks Aurora, why, I didn't know you were—" "Good evening, Frank," I said, smiling warmly. I handed him the VIP pass my friend from the city had secured. "Just here to support the old team. How are you?" He looked at the pass, then at the black, imposing SUV, which looked identical to the mayor's. He saw the official city seal on the pass. His professional training took over. He scanned it. The gate arm lifted. "You're all set. Mrs. Brooks, welcome. Just park anywhere in the reserved section." "Thank you, Frank. I will," I said. I drove slowly down the ramp into the exclusive, brightly lit section of the garage, reserved for the family and their most important guests. I passed my old spot, the temporary S. Cole XX. Director sign was still there, but someone likely Savannah herself had added a tacky pink, glittery border to it. It looked pathetic. I drove right past it. I drove past Derek's spot. I drove past the spot reserved for the company's legal counsel, and then I pulled, in one smooth, perfect motion, into the spot at the very end, the one directly against the floor-to-ceiling glass wall of the atrium, the one with the sign that read, in imposing block letters. Chairman M. Mercer. It was a spot Derek himself, in 12 years, had never been allowed to use. It was Martin's throne. I put the navigator in park, but I did not turn off the engine, not yet. I reached over and tapped the large 12-inch tablet I had mounted on a custom stand on the dashboard, facing outward through the windshield. It was plugged into the car's power. The screen brightness turned to maximum. I opened the presentation I had prepared. It was a simple, looping slideshow. It started a moment later. The first slide was a photo, a candid, zoomed-in shot from a colleague's social media. Derek and Savannah, 6 weeks ago, at a restaurant in Chicago. They were supposed to be on separate site visits. Here, his arm was around her. Her head was on his shoulder. They were not discussing logistics. The second slide, an email chain, screenshot and enlarged. Savannah's email to me, from her first week. Hi, Aurora. I'm so lost. Could you possibly send me your files on the Riverfront project? I just need to see how you structured the proposals. You're a lifesaver. The third slide, the follow-up email, dated 2 hours later, this one from Savannah to Martin. Martin, as requested. I've completed the preliminary proposal structure for the Riverfront project. Please see attached. I think my new strategic approach will really streamline things. My files, my work, my name nowhere to be found. The fourth slide, another photo. Derek and Savannah, her hand on his chest, laughing. This one was from the Mercer Point holiday party, 2 years before she was even hired, when she was just a friend of Derek's. The fifth slide, the text message from Derek to Martin, the one I had found on the shared family iPad, the one he sent the morning they gave her my job. Just give her my wife's spot. She's the priority now. The slideshow looped, photo, email, photo, text message, pause, repeat. It was a silent, damning digital story. Playing out on a bright screen in the most visible spot in the entire building, I turned off the engine, which automatically switched the feed to the car's internal battery. The show would go on. I reached into the back seat, where I had folded the seats down. I retrieved a large 9x12 manila envelope. I had typed a label for it in the same imposing font as Martin's parking sign. For the board investors. About current leadership choices. I placed it on the dashboard, right under the tablet, where the light from the screen illuminated it perfectly. From the lobby, you would not be able to miss it. The investors, the city council members, the press, all mingling in the glass atrium, would see a black SUV parked in their host's personal spot. They would see the bright, flashing screen. They would see the envelope. They would know, instantly, that something was very, very wrong. I finally stepped out of the car. I locked it. I straightened my dark blue sheath dress, a color that projected power, not mourning. My hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon. I was not the discarded wife. I was the new regional director for Harbor North Development. I was a professional. I walked, my heels clicking with a steady, unhurried rhythm on the concrete, toward the atrium doors. I saw them before they saw me. The lobby was packed. Martin was holding court by the main staircase, laughing with Harlan Boyd, his biggest investor. Derek was by the bar, looking harried, talking to the event staff, and Savannah, the guest of honor, was standing near the entrance, a flute of champagne in her hand, looking nervous and out of her depth. She saw me first. Her smile froze. The champagne flute tilted in her hand, spilling onto her dress. She let out a small, sharp gasp. She knew, instantly, that I was not there to make a scene. I was there to end one. Derek heard the gasp and turned. His eyes followed Savannah's. When he saw me, the blood drained from his face. He went a pale, sickly white. His eyes darted past me, toward the garage entrance, and he saw it. He saw the black navigator. He saw the glowing screen. He saw the spot it was in. He did not just understand what I had done. He understood the poetry of it. He understood, in that horrifying public moment, that this was the unforgettable spot. I had not just taken his father's parking space, I had parked a rolling billboard of his infidelity and her incompetence in the middle of his father's ego. In front of everyone they were trying to impress, Martin, annoyed by the sudden shift in the room's energy, turned. He saw me. His hello daughter-in-law smile started, then died when he saw the look on Derek's face. He followed Derek's gaze to the glass wall. I watched his face as he processed it. The confusion, the flicker of, "What is that?" The sudden, dawning, volcanic rage. He barked at Derek. "What is that? Get that car out of my spot now." He immediately snapped his fingers for a security guard, who came running. "There is a vehicle in my spot," Martin hissed, keeping his voice low but vibrating with fury. "Get it towed. Get it out of here. I don't care how." The guard ran to the garage entrance. Derek was already on his radio, screaming at the valets. I just stood there and watched. The guard came running back 2 minutes later, his face pale. "Sir," he said, stammering. "Mr. Mercer, I can't touch it." "What do you mean? You can't touch it." Martin roared. "Sir, it's an authorized vehicle. The pass is from the city. It's on the Alpha level guest list. We don't have authorization to move it. It's listed as a priority guest." The buzz in the gala, which had been a low hum of cocktails and networking, was dying. People were turning. They were looking at Martin. They were looking at Derek. And they were looking at the car. Harlan Boyd, the investor, took a step toward the glass, squinting, trying to read the glowing screen. The party had fractured. The music was still playing, but the atmosphere was shattered, and Savannah, the keynote speaker, had not even taken the stage. Martin's hand shot out and clamped around my arm. The grip was tight, his knuckles white. The public, paternal smile was gone, replaced by a raw, unfiltered fury. "My office? Now," he growled, his voice a low vibration that was more terrifying than any shout. He did not mean his office on the top floor. He meant the small, soundproofed VIP receiving room just off the main lobby, the one used for hostile negotiations and quiet threats. He dragged me through the crowd, which parted in a wave of sudden, nervous silence. The music seemed to stutter. I did not resist. I walked with him, my back straight, my head high. I felt, rather than saw, Derek and Savannah scrambling in our wake, like two panicked children following an angry parent. Martin shoved the door open, pushed me inside, and slammed it shut behind Savannah. The heavy, insulated wood cut off the party noise instantly, plunging us into a thick, ringing silence. Martin spun on me, his face a mask of purple rage. He was breathing heavily, his hands clenched. "You," he spat, "you are embarrassing this family, in front of my investors, in front of the city." I stood perfectly still in the center of the small, opulent room. I did not flinch. I let the silence hang for a moment, letting his accusation echo. "I learned it from you." "Martin," I said, my voice calm, clear, and cold as the granite tabletop between us. What did you say?" "You taught me the rules. The most important person, the one who is the priority, gets the special treatment, gets the best spot." I tilted my head. "You said my husband's mistress was the priority. You said she deserved my spot. I'm just following your new company policy. I'm demonstrating my importance." "This is not business," Derek burst forward, his voice cracking with panic. He was seeing his inheritance, his entire life, flashing before his eyes. "You're dragging our private life into the company. This is hysterical. Our private life." I turned my gaze to my husband. It was the first time I had looked him in the eye since the kitchen. "You mean, like the text message you sent to your father, on company time, using company assets, to reassign a company resource from one executive to another based on your personal relationship?" I pulled out my phone. I opened the screenshot of the text. "Just give her my wife's spot. She's the priority now." Is that a private matter, Derek, or is that a catastrophic failure of corporate governance? I looked at Martin. I wonder what Harlan Boyd would think about that. He's on the ethics committee for the city, isn't he? Martin's face went gray. I had just taken Derek's personal betrayal and reframed it, correctly, as a massive business liability. Savannah finally spoke, her voice a pathetic, reedy whisper. She was wringing her hands, her spilled champagne stain a dark mark on her expensive dress. I was just doing what I was told. Martin, Mr. Mercer. He gave me the title. I turned to her. The look on my face stopped her cold. Were you following a directive, Savannah? I asked, my voice soft, but sharp as a scalpel. Or was that just pillow talk? She recoiled, her face crumbling. That was it, the line. The one that hit the precise, unspoken truth. She had no corporate defense. She was not an executive. She was an affair. And I had just named her as such in front of her lover and his father. That is enough. Aurora, Derek shouted, lunging forward as if to protect her. Not quite, I said. I reached into my clutch, the one that matched my dress. I pulled out a second manila envelope, identical to the one in the car, and slapped it down on the granite tabletop. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent room. What is that? Martin said, his voice flat, his eyes dead. He was no longer angry, he was terrified. That, I said, is a copy of the Riverfront Lofts proposal, the one I wrote. It includes my original metadata, my email chains with the city, and my timeline. It's paired with the file Savannah sent you 2 hours later, claiming it as her new strategic approach. It's proof. I pushed it toward him. It's proof that I was the one who negotiated every key project for the last 3 years. It's proof that she was just the signature. It's proof that you handed my job and your investors' money to an incompetent fraud. I looked at the three of them, a perfect triangle of deceit and panic. The envelope in the car is for the board. This one is for you. A courtesy. You have 5 minutes to get that car, and its slideshow, towed, before I walk out that door and personally hand-deliver this file to Harlan Boyd and to the Port Riverton Business Journal. Martin stared at the envelope. He saw it all. The lawsuits, the investor revolt, the public humiliation, the end of his legacy. For the first time in the 12 years I had known him, Martin Mercer looked defeated. He slumped into one of the velvet chairs, his fury gone, replaced by a hollow, desperate exhaustion. He looked up at me, the mask of the king shattered, leaving only an old, frightened man. Aurora, he pleaded, his voice now a rasp. Please, let's not do this in public. We're family. We can talk about this. Just turn off the screen. We'll talk. Just us, as a family. Family. The word was a joke, a weapon he no longer had the strength to wield. No, I said. The word was final. We're done talking. I'm not coming back. I don't want to come back. I'm at Harbor North now. I'm in a better place. I leaned in, my voice dropping so only he could hear it. I just came tonight to return the message. You told me, in your office, that you needed young energy and a new perspective. You decided I was old, that I was predictable. I just wanted to show you, and your investors, just how unpredictable an old, stale asset can be when you push her out for a new one. I straightened up. I had come to do one thing, and it was done. Derek, seeing his last chance slip away, completely unraveled, his face contorted, no longer the charming prince, but a spoiled, cornered child. Fine, he shrieked, his voice breaking. Go, run to them, but you'll get nothing, you hear me. You'll get nothing from this family. You'll get nothing from the Mercers. I'll see you in court with nothing but the clothes on your back. The threat hung in the air, his last pathetic attempt to control me. I looked at him, not with anger, but with a profound, weary pity. That's fine. Derek, I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. Harbor North pays me for my achievements. I don't need the Mercer name for that. I turned, my hand on the doorknob. As for the house, the investments, and the last 12 years of my life, you're right. We will see each other in court. I opened the door. The sound of the party, the music, the chatter, rushed back in. I took a step out, back into the light. I stepped back into the atrium, the sound of the heavy door closing behind me sealing their humiliation. Martin, looking suddenly frail and 10 years older, stumbled out a moment later. He had to. He had a gala to host. He straightened his suit, a pathetic, reflexive gesture of his lost authority, and forced a smile that looked more like a pained grimace. He had to return to his investors, to the press, to the city council members, and pretend that nothing was profoundly, irrevocably wrong. But the party was over. The air was thick with a new kind of silence, the nervous, excited silence of a public execution. The elephant in the room was a 12-foot-long black Lincoln Navigator, parked with impeccable arrogance in the chairman's spot, and it was still running. The slideshow looped, bright and relentless. The picture of Derek and Savannah in Chicago. His arm draped over her. The email of her claiming my work. And the text that started it all, flashing over and over in the ambient light of the gala. Just give her my wife's spot. She's the priority now. The whispers were no longer whispers. They were a circulating, audible murmur. I saw Frank, the deputy commissioner Savannah had personally insulted, standing with Eleanor Vance, a sharp, powerful city council member. Eleanor caught my eye and walked over, her face a mask of calculated neutrality, but her eyes sharp with intrigue. She nodded toward the garage, where the light of the screen was still flashing. "Aurora," she said, her voice low. "That's quite the digital presentation." She squinted, reading the screen as it showed my original email next to Savannah's plagiarized one. "Your name is on that original proposal. Are you telling me you're still doing work for them, even after moving to Harbor North?" This was the moment. The room was quiet. People were pretending not to listen, which meant they were hanging on every word. I didn't need to raise my voice. The loudest thing in the room was that SUV. "No, Eleanor," I said, my voice clear and professional, pitching it just for her, but knowing it would carry. "I'm not. That's just a small reminder of the work I did before I left." "Why did you leave, Aurora?" she asked. The question direct and political. I looked her straight in the eye. "I made the decision to leave Mercer Point when it became clear that professional competence was no longer being valued above private relationships." Eleanor, a woman who had fought her way up through a decade of good old boys clubs, understood. Her expression tightened, a flash of recognition, of respect. "I see," she said. "Well, good for you, Mrs. Brooks, and good for Harbor North." She had just, in that one sentence, blessed my new position and condemned my old one. Across the lobby, Derek was in a full, visible panic. He had seen his father fail. He had seen the security guard fail. Now, in a last, desperate act of male bravado, he was going to do it himself. He bolted, actually sprinting across the marble lobby. A terrible look for the night's host. He slammed his hand on the garage door button and ran out onto the concrete. He ran straight for the Navigator, fumbling in his tuxedo pockets for his own keys, as if they were a magic wand that could undo this. He reached the driver's side door and yanked on the handle. It was locked. He yanked again, harder. Then he balled his fist and banged on the shatterproof glass, screaming at the inanimate object. Frank, the head of security, was right behind him, his professionalism finally overriding his fear of the Mercer name. "Mr. Mercer, sir, you have to step away from the vehicle. This is my company. This is my father's spot. I will move this car," Derek shrieked, his voice echoing in the concrete enclosure, loud enough for the whole party to hear. "Sir, I cannot let you do that," Frank said, planting himself between Derek and the door. "That vehicle is registered to Aurora Brooks. Her name is on the authorized VIP pass from the city. We have a security advisory that she is to be given full, unrestricted access to this location. If I let you touch it, I'm liable. You cannot, and will not, touch this car." Derek stared at him, his mouth open, utterly defeated. He was a prince, locked out of his own castle, by a rental. Inside, the poor, flustered event coordinator was trying to salvage the night. She tapped the microphone, her voice shaking. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, it is my honor to introduce our keynote speaker, Ms. Savannah Cole." A weak, pathetic scattering of applause. Savannah walked to the podium as if walking to the gallows. Her face was pale, the champagne stain on her dress a dark, spreading map of her failure. She stood at the podium, and behind her, through the glass wall, the slideshow continued. "She's the priority now. Flash, I'm so lost. Can you send me your files, Flash?" She began to read, her voice a thin, trembling whisper. The future of Port Riverton is about synergy." She was just reading the words on the slides. She had no idea what they meant. When she got to the 5-year projection, a slide I knew Maya had built, and Savannah had likely never even understood, she faltered. Our Q4 to Q1 projection shows significant. She could not pronounce the financial terms. The investors in the front row, men and women who managed billions, were not even looking at her. They were looking at each other. They were looking at me. They saw the chasm. They saw the con. When she finished, the silence was awful. No one clapped, until Harlan Boyd, the lead investor, the man Martin had been trying to impress all night, stood up. He slowly, deliberately, put his hands together. 1, 2, 3, 4 slow, mocking claps. The room was frozen. "Mr. Mercer," Harlan called out, his voice booming into the silence. He was not looking at Savannah. He was looking straight at Martin, who was trying to hide behind a decorative tree. "Harlan," Martin said, his voice a dry croak. "Good to hear from you. This new vision has been illuminating," Harlan said, his voice dripping sarcasm. "But I find myself more interested in the old one. Can you explain to me why a person of Mrs. Brooks's proven talents we have all relied on for years, is now working for your chief competitor?" It was a public indictment, a kill shot. Martin's face, which had been white, went a deep, mottled red. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. All the power, all the bluster, all the daughter-in-law speeches, gone. He had no answer. I chose that moment. The climax had passed. My work was done. I smiled warmly at Harlan Boyd. I turned to the room, as if I were simply leaving a boring party early. "Thank you all so much for the lovely evening," I said, my voice pleasant. I gave a small, polite wave. I turned and walked toward the main doors. I did not run. I did not look back. I was leaving them with the image the woman they fired, the wife they discarded, standing in the ashes of their reputation, having just taken the chairman's spot. I made it to the lobby doors. "Aurora, wait." It was Derek. He came running, skidding on the marble, his face a pathetic mess of tears and desperation. He grabbed my arm. Just as his father had, I stopped. I slowly turned and looked down at his hand on my arm until he snatched it back, as if burned. "We can talk," he pleaded, his voice a hoarse, broken whisper. This is crazy. We're married. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. Just make it stop. Please, call off the car." I looked at him. This man I had once loved. This hollow, terrified shell. There was nothing left to say. So I did not say anything. I reached into my clutch and pulled out the crisp, white envelope from my divorce attorney. I pushed it, flat, into the center of his chest. He looked down, confused. What is this?" You said you wanted to talk, I said. My voice was not angry. It was not sad. It was just finished. So you'll talk to them. He looked down, fumbled with the flap, and saw the law firm's letterhead. He saw the words, Petition for Dissolution of Marriage. His face crumpled. I turned and pushed open the heavy glass doors, walking out into the cool, clear night air. I didn't need a valet. I was walking. As I passed the garage entrance, I paused. The black SUV was still there, a dark, gleaming monument in the chairman's spot. The slideshow was still running, its bright light flooding the concrete, a digital campfire for the investors to gather around and tell ghost stories about the Mercer dynasty. The entire gala, every guest, every car, was forced to go around it. They had to physically navigate the evidence of my revenge just to leave the building. My parking spot was, as I had promised, unforgettable. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass. I did not need to go back. I did not need an apology. My revenge was not a single moment of victory. It was a permanent state of being. It was the knowledge that for the rest of their lives, every time they saw an empty parking spot, every time an investor pulled funding, every time they heard the name Harbor North, they would remember this night. They would remember me, and I would be gone, building my own empire, on my own terms. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and let's all connect and share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Zoe Revenge Stories, like this video, and give that hype button some love so more people can hear this story.